We are actively coordinating our efforts with our partners across Europe. Of course, any assistance we provide is solely on the condition that it does not weaken our own defense within Ukraine, and that it simultaneously serves as an investment in our diplomatic capabilities. We offer protection from war to those who help us, Ukraine, bring about a dignified end to this war.
The world just flipped and nobody saw it coming. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening right now, because if you blinked in the last 48 hours, you missed the moment the global order quietly started rewriting itself. Here's where we are. The United States, the most powerful military on the planet, is quietly, almost embarrassingly, going hat in hand to Ukraine. Not the other way around, Ukraine. The country that's been fighting a ground war for years, outgunned and outmanned. The one that certain American officials have been publicly dragging through the mud on national television. That same country. America needs something from them. And the reason is almost poetic in its irony. Those Iranian Shahed drones, the cheap, buzzing, kamikaze-style weapons that have been terrorizing the skies across the Middle East, turns out they're a lot harder to shoot down than the US. And in a moment of uncomfortable honesty, American officials have come to realize that Ukraine has spent years figuring out exactly how to deal with them. Ballistic missiles, loitering munitions, drone swarms, Ukraine's been living this reality. They adapted out of necessity. They built the expertise. So now Gulf states, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, they're all reaching out to Kyiv. And President Zelensky? He didn't slam the door. He opened it, but he put something on the table first. He said essentially, we'll help you, but this help goes both ways. Any assistance Ukraine provides comes with one condition. It cannot weaken Ukraine's own defenses, and it must translate into real diplomatic support for ending the war on Ukraine's terms.
Our partners turn to us, to Ukraine, for help with Shahed defense, with expertise, with real work. There were requests regarding this from the American side as well. Just in these past few days, I've personally spoken with the leaders of the Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Jordan, and Kuwait. There will be further negotiations with other regional leaders as well. We are actively coordinating our efforts with our partners across Europe. Of course, any assistance we provide is solely on the condition that it does not weaken our own defense within Ukraine, and that it simultaneously serves as an investment in our diplomatic capabilities. We offer protection from war to those who help us, Ukraine, bring about a dignified end to this war.
Protection for protection. Support for support. Think about what that moment represents. A nation fighting for its survival, stretched thin on every front, is now being asked to teach the world's superpower how to handle a threat. The superpower didn't take seriously enough. And Zelensky turned it into leverage, not out of arrogance, but out of pure strategic necessity. Now, while that negotiation is quietly taking shape, the official messaging out of Washington is going in the opposite direction. There's a narrative being pushed loudly, on camera, that America's current weapons shortage, the reason there's talk of a massive emergency spending package, is because weapons were sent to Ukraine, that Ukraine is the problem, that the last administration gave everything away for free to a country far, far away. And that's the part that should make you stop and think. Because on the same week that America is privately asking Ukraine for help, the public-facing message is still pointing fingers at Ukraine. Both of those things are happening simultaneously.
With respect to munitions, ammunition, weapon stockpiles, the United States of America has more than enough capability to not only successfully execute Operation Epic Fury, but to go much further. And we have weapon stockpiles in places that many people in this world don't even know about. However, the president in that post was pointing out that, unfortunately, we had a very stupid and incompetent leader in this White House for 4 years who gave away many of our best weapons for nothing, for free, to another country very far away by the name of Ukraine. So the president was pointing out how that was an unwise decision, but nevertheless, don't doubt the strength and the might of the American military.
That's not a small contradiction. That's a crack in the wall. Let me zoom out for a second, because this isn't just a Ukraine story. Right now, the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow choke point where roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through, has essentially ground to a halt. Iran doesn't need to win a traditional military engagement to achieve its goals. It just needs to keep that corridor under threat, keep the insurance rates astronomical, keep captains nervous, keep buyers looking elsewhere. And that's exactly what's happening. Qatar has suspended its liquefied natural gas production. Aluminum smelters in Bahrain and Qatar have declared force majeure, a legal term that essentially means we can't fulfill our contracts because the situation is out of our control. Refineries across Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iraq are going offline. A tanker was hit near Kuwait, oil spill in the water. China, which is the world's largest buyer of Gulf oil, has told its biggest refineries to stop exporting diesel and gasoline. They're not picking up from that region right now. That's Beijing making a quiet economic calculation. The risk isn't worth it. And here's what makes Iran's strategy genuinely sophisticated and genuinely dangerous. It's not about volume, it's about persistence. The barrage of missiles and drones has actually slowed down, but that's by design. You don't need to flood the skies if just the possibility of a strike is enough to keep the markets jittery and the tankers docked. Credible threat is the weapon. Everything else is just demonstration. Phase 1, as strategists are calling it, is the energy infrastructure play. But Iran has made clear there's more on the table: tourist centers, major attractions, high-visibility targets across the region. Places like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, cities that have spent decades and billions of dollars positioning themselves as safe, glamorous, stable destinations for the world's wealthy. One or two high-profile strikes, and that brand evaporates overnight. For those Gulf nations, this isn't just geopolitical, it's existential. Their entire economic model depends on being a reliable, peaceful place to do business, to visit, to invest in. Iran knows that, and Iran is squeezing it. So who steps in to mediate? Not the United States. China. China's foreign minister got on the phone with Saudi Arabia and announced it's sending a special envoy to the Middle East to help broker some kind of de-escalation. Saudi Arabia asked for it, and China answered. Let that settle for a moment. A decade ago, even 5 years ago, that role would have been unthinkable without American leadership at the center of it. America was the deal maker, the guarantor, the presence that made other countries feel like the adults were in the room. That dynamic is shifting in real time. The Gulf states are not waiting around to see if Washington figures itself out. They're calling Beijing. Meanwhile, Washington's approach to the Kurdish question, trying to pressure or maneuver Kurdish forces into essentially provoking a confrontation with Iran that fell apart quickly. Kurdish leadership made it clear they weren't going to be used as a tripwire, and then found out their supposed involvement had already been leaked to the press as if it was a done deal. The Kurdish response was blunt. That's not happening. That's not us. There's a moment in all of this that I keep coming back to. Canada's Prime Minister recently gave a speech in Australia on the other side of the world, strengthening ties with a government the US has had complicated recent history with, and said something that felt less like a diplomatic pleasantry and more like a diagnosis.
The fact is, right now, many countries are concluding that they must develop greater strategic autonomy. And this impulse is understandable. When the rules no longer protect you, you must defend yourself. A country that can't feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options. But in the 21st century, the requirements for economic security and prosperity of our countries extend far beyond food, conventional energy, and defense, as important as these are. Today, sovereignty requires reliable access to space-based communications and storage, vaccines, semiconductors, payment systems, and capital. Because governments and businesses went for decades prioritizing efficiency over resilience. We've developed supply chains and trading relationships that create dependencies on the great powers, sometimes even individual corporations. All of these affecting essential elements of our sovereignty. And as that integration is weaponized, this creates fundamental vulnerabilities.
He talked about how countries are being forced to reckon with their own strategic vulnerabilities. That supply chains and trade relationships built around efficiency rather than resilience have created dependencies that are now being weaponized. That real sovereignty in the modern era isn't just about food and energy and defense anymore, it's about semiconductors, payment systems, space-based communications, capital flows. He didn't name anyone. He didn't have to. And then there's the moment that no one quite knows how to categorize. An Iranian frigate, a Navy vessel that had been doing joint exercises with India, 2,000 miles from Iranian shores, was struck and sunk by what officials are saying was a U.S. submarine torpedo. The first such sinking of a naval vessel since World War II, roughly 130 sailors in international waters. Without warning, Iran's foreign minister didn't mince words. He said the U.S. will bitterly regret setting that precedent. He added that when diplomacy is treated like a transaction, when negotiations are bombed out of spite, you don't get peace, you get this. And separately, there are reports of Iranian missiles intercepted near Turkey, a NATO member which, if confirmed, carries massive implications. Article 5 of NATO's treaty essentially means an attack on one is an attack on all. But the timing is notable. Iran immediately denied firing anything at Turkey. And given that almost every actor in this conflict, every single one has a documented history of shaping information to serve their narrative, it's genuinely difficult to know where the truth sits. What's clear is that the pressure to draw more parties into this conflict is building. Whether it works is another question. Here's what I'll leave you with. We are watching, in real time, a reordering of who holds leverage and who doesn't. The country asking for help is the one that was supposed to be giving it. The country being asked to step up is the one still fighting a war on its own soil. The mediator arriving on the scene speaks Mandarin, not English. And the nations that built their futures on stability and openness are discovering that those things can disappear faster than anyone planned for. None of this was inevitable. All of it was foreseeable. The question now is whether anyone involved has the clarity and the honesty to navigate what comes next. Stay with this story. It's not slowing down.